The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls reaching toward a dome that displayed the swirling colors of the nebula outside. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate the unique needs of different alien physiologies. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible communication. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the human podium, her hands gripping the edges as she looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some had multiple eyes that blinked in sequence, others possessed tentacles that writhed with emotion, and a few were simply clouds of sentient gas contained within environmental suits. After 15 years of diplomatic service, she still felt the weight of representing her entire species in this vast assembly. "Honored council members," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the chamber through the translation network. "Humanity requests a formal review of the trade restriction amendment that has been in place for the past 3 standard years. Our merchant vessels continue to be denied access to 17 major trade routes, and our colonies are struggling to obtain essential medical supplies." A ripple of what might have been laughter came from the Zephyrian section. The jellyfish-like beings pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the translation system interpreted as amusement. Council Speaker Vorthka, a massive creature resembling a walking tree with bark-like skin, raised one of his branch arms for silence. "Ambassador Chun," Vorthka's voice resonated like wind through ancient forests. "The Council has reviewed humanity's request 17 times in the past cycle. The answer remains unchanged. The trade restriction amendment exists for the protection of civilized commerce throughout the galaxy." "Protection from what exactly?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be the same diplomatic non-response she'd heard countless times before. "From the unpredictable nature of human economic practices," replied Councillor Zix9, the Crystalline Coalition's representative. Their faceted body caught the chamber's light and scattered it in rainbow patterns. "Human traders have demonstrated a concerning tendency toward aggressive negotiation tactics and market manipulation." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. The so-called aggressive tactics amounted to humans being better at mathematics and logistics than most other species. When human merchants could calculate optimal trade routes in their heads while their alien counterparts needed advanced computers, it wasn't manipulation, it was efficiency. "If I may remind the Council," Sarah said carefully, "human traders have never violated any established trade laws. Our success in commerce stems from preparation and hard work, not deception." "Hard work," repeated Councillor Mektar of the Hive Collective, their insectoid features clicking with what the translation system labeled as skepticism. An interesting euphemism for species-wide obsession with competition and resource acquisition. The chamber filled with the various alien equivalents of murmurs of agreement. Sarah had heard these same accusations for years. Humans worked too hard, thought too quickly, and adapted too fast. In a galaxy where most species had reached comfortable plateaus in their development, humanity's continued growth was seen as disruptive rather than admirable. "Speaker Vorthka," Sarah tried again, "our colonies on the rim worlds are in genuine need. The restriction on medical supply routes has resulted in preventable deaths. Surely humanitarian concerns outweigh trade politics." Humanitarian, Vorthka seemed to taste the word. "Always, humans speak of their humanitarian concerns. Yet your species continues to expand into new systems at an alarming rate. 17 new colonies established in the past 2 years alone. This expansion destabilizes established territorial agreements." "We expand to uninhabited systems," Sarah protested. "We have never encroached upon claimed territory." "Uninhabited by current standards," corrected Councillor Yithmel of the Aquatic Federation, their gill slits fluttering with agitation. "Many of those systems contain valuable resources that could benefit the galactic community if managed properly through council oversight." Sarah realized she was fighting a losing battle, but she couldn't give up. Not when human children were dying from diseases that could be easily cured with medicines manufactured just a few systems away, but blocked from delivery by bureaucratic regulations. "Then, what does humanity need to do to earn equal treatment in this council?" she asked bluntly. The chamber fell silent. It was a question that had never been asked so directly before. Speaker Vorthka's ancient eyes, all 6 of them, focused on Sarah with something that might have been surprise. Equal treatment. Counselor Zix9's crystalline form pulsed with what the translation system struggled to interpret. Humanity has equal representation. 1 vote, same as every other member species. Equal representation, but restricted trade rights, limited territorial expansion approvals, and constant scrutiny of our scientific research, Sarah countered. When the vegan empire requests permission to establish a mining operation, it's approved within days. When humans make the same request, it takes months and often ends in rejection. The vegan empire has demonstrated 5,000 years of stable, predictable behavior, rumbled Vorthka. Humanity has been in space for less than 2 centuries and has already shown concerning patterns of rapid development and aggressive expansion. Aggressive expansion into empty space, Sarah emphasized again. For now, added Counselor Mektar ominously. Your species' projected growth models suggest that within 500 years, humans will outnumber every other council species combined. This is not sustainable for galactic stability. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt the weight of every alien gaze upon her. She was being blamed for her species' success at reproduction and survival, traits that should be celebrated, not condemned. Are you suggesting that humanity should limit our population growth to make other species more comfortable? Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. We suggest that humanity should consider the greater good of the galactic community, replied Vorthka diplomatically. Sarah looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose species had ruled the galaxy for millennia before humans even discovered fire. She saw fear in their alien features, not fear of human aggression or violence, but fear of being outcompete, fear of becoming irrelevant. I see, Sarah said finally. This isn't about trade restrictions or territorial disputes. This is about the fact that humanity refuses to stagnate. The chamber erupted in alien protests, translation devices working furiously to convert the cacophony of indignant responses. Sarah stood quietly at her podium, waiting for the noise to subside. When Vorthka finally restored order, his voice carried a tone of finality. Ambassador Chun, humanity's concerns have been noted and will be given due consideration. This session is concluded. Sarah knew a dismissal when she heard one. She gathered her data tablets and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. As she reached the doors, she paused and turned back to address the council one final time. Honored members, she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed space. I want you to remember this moment. Remember that when humanity asked for nothing more than fair treatment, you chose to treat us as a threat. Remember that we came to you in good faith, seeking cooperation and mutual benefit. She paused, letting her words sink in. And remember that when humans are forced to solve problems alone, we tend to be very good at it. With that, Sarah Chun walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, leaving behind 15 years of diplomatic service and taking with her the growing certainty that humanity's future lay not in the stars above, but in their own hands. Behind her, the council members sat in uncomfortable silence, not yet understanding that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. The next morning, Sarah stood in the communication center of the human embassy, staring at the quantum transmission array that connected Earth to the rest of human space. She had spent all night writing and rewriting her report, knowing that her words would change everything. Are you certain about this, Ambassador? Asked Commander Torres, the embassy's military attaché. Once we send this message, there's no taking it back. Sarah thought about the dying children on the rim worlds, about the human merchants turned away from profitable routes, about the subtle but constant message that humanity didn't belong in the galactic community. Send it, she said quietly. The transmission burst across human space faster than light, carrying Sarah's final diplomatic report to Earth's Global Council, to the colonial administrations on hundreds of worlds, and to the millions of humans scattered across the galaxy. The message was simple and direct. Diplomatic efforts with the Galactic Council have failed. Humanity must now chart its own course among the stars. Within hours, responses began flooding back. Not questions or protests, but confirmations and pledges of support. The colonial governors were ready. The merchant fleets were ready. The scientific research stations were ready. Humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than even Sarah had realized. 3 days later, every human representative to the Galactic Council submitted their resignations simultaneously. Human merchant vessels stopped requesting permission for trade routes and simply disappeared from galactic tracking systems. Human colonies ceased all official communication with Council oversight committees. The galaxy's youngest species had just declared independence from the oldest galactic government in known history. And, in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, Speaker Vorthkos stared at 47 resignation letters scattered across his ancient desk, finally, beginning to understand what humanity's silence might truly cost them all. The first sign that something was wrong came exactly 37 days after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society. Counselor Yithmel of the Aquatic Federation was reviewing routine shipping manifests when her assistant brought an unusual report to her attention. The water-filled chamber where she conducted business rippled with her agitation as she read the data. "This cannot be accurate," she said, her gill slits fluttering rapidly. "Run the analysis again." The assistant, a younger member of her species, bobbed nervously in the water. "I have run it 6 times, Counselor. The results are consistent. Human shipping traffic has decreased by 97% across all monitored space lanes." Yithmel's large eyes focused on the holographic display showing trade route usage. The familiar patterns of human merchant vessels that had crisscrossed the galaxy for decades had simply vanished. Where once hundreds of human ships traveled known routes daily, now only scattered vessels remained. And those appeared to be private craft rather than commercial transports. "Where did they go?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Unknown, Counselor. They appear to have developed alternative routes that do not cross any Council-monitored space." This should have been good news. The Galactic Council had spent years complaining about aggressive human trading practices. The removal of human competition should have been cause for celebration among the established merchant guilds. Instead, Yithmel felt a growing unease as she reviewed the economic projections. "Show me the quarterly profit reports from the major shipping consortiums," she ordered. The hologram shifted to display financial data from the galaxy's largest commercial operations. Yithmel's unease transformed into alarm as she absorbed the information. Profits were down across every major shipping company, not by small margins, but by catastrophic amounts. The Vegan Empire's merchant fleet reported a 43% decrease in quarterly profits. The Crystalline Coalition's mining consortiums showed similar losses. Even the massive Hive Collective's commercial operations were struggling. "I don't understand," her assistant said, reading the same data. With human competition removed, profits should have increased. Yithmel was beginning to understand, and the realization made her stomach acid churn unpleasantly. "Display historical shipping efficiency ratings by species." The hologram changed again, showing performance metrics that made the truth unavoidably clear. Human merchant vessels had consistently achieved the highest efficiency ratings in the galaxy. Their ships completed routes faster, carried larger payloads, and suffered fewer delays than any other species' fleets. The humans hadn't just been competitors, they had been setting the standard that forced everyone else to improve their own operations. Without human competition, the other species have relaxed their standards, Yithmel realized aloud. Shipping times have increased, payload efficiency has decreased, and overall service quality has declined. But that wasn't the worst of it. As Yithmel dug deeper into the data, she discovered something even more troubling. Human merchants hadn't just been efficient, they had been innovative. They had pioneered 17 different improvements to standard shipping procedures in the past decade alone. Other species had adopted these innovations without crediting their human origins, simply accepting them as new industry standards. Now, with humans gone, there was no one pushing the envelope of commercial efficiency. The entire galactic economy had settled into comfortable mediocrity. "Counselor," her assistant said hesitantly, "there's something else you should see." The hologram shifted to show a star chart of the galactic rim, the outer edge of known space where newer colonies struggled to establish themselves. Red warning indicators dotted the map like a disease. "What am I looking at?" Yithmel asked, though she was beginning to suspect. Colony failure reports. 17 rim worlds have declared bankruptcy in the past month. Another 31 have requested emergency economic assistance. Yithmel's heart sank as she realized the implications. The rim colonies had been heavily dependent on human merchant networks for essential supplies and trade connections to the galactic core. With human vessels no longer serving those routes, and no other species willing or able to fill the gap efficiently, the colonies were dying. Have any council members offered to expand their shipping operations to serve the abandoned routes? She asked without much hope. 3 minor consortiums have submitted proposals, but their cost estimates are. The assistant paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing, substantially higher than previous human rates. Yithmel pulled up the proposals and nearly choked on the water she was filtering through her gills. The shipping costs were 3 to 4 times what human merchants had charged, with delivery times that were double or triple the previous standards. At these rates, the rim colonies won't be able to afford basic supplies, she said. No, counselor. Many are already beginning to discuss abandonment of their settlements. Yithmel floated in her chamber, surrounded by data that painted a clear picture of galactic economic disaster. The removal of humanity from galactic commerce hadn't freed up opportunities for other species. It had revealed how dependent the entire system had become on human efficiency and innovation. Send a priority message to Speaker Vorth-Ka, she ordered finally. The council needs to convene an emergency economic session. Should I mention the human situation specifically? Her assistant asked. Yithmel considered the question. The council had spent years complaining about human economic dominance, and now they were discovering what the galaxy looked like without it. The irony was almost too bitter to acknowledge. Yes, she said finally. Make it clear that we need to discuss the economic consequences of humanity's withdrawal from galactic commerce. As her assistant hurried to send the message, Yithmel remained floating in her chamber, staring at the data displays that showed the gradual collapse of economic systems the council had taken for granted. She was beginning to understand that humanity's silence wasn't just an absence. It was a presence that the galaxy couldn't afford to lose. Meanwhile, in a research station orbiting a distant star, Dr. Kethvox of the Scientific Collective was making discoveries that would soon add another layer to the Council's growing crisis. The Etherian scientist had spent the past week analyzing the most recent galactic research publication databases, looking for trends in scientific advancement across Council member species. What she found defied all her expectations. Computer, display research publication rates by species for the past 5 standard years, she commanded, her voice causing the crystalline formations that comprised her body to vibrate with harmonic frequencies. The holographic display materialized before her, showing publication rates, citation indexes, and breakthrough categorizations for all major council member species. The data told a story that Dr. Kethvox found deeply disturbing. Human research publications had ceased entirely 37 days ago, exactly coinciding with their withdrawal from the council. That was expected. What wasn't expected was the dramatic decline in research quality and innovation rates among all other species since humanity's departure. Computer analyzed collaborative research projects between humans and other species over the past decade. The new display revealed the truth that Dr. Kethvox had begun to suspect. 46% of all major scientific breakthroughs in the past decade had involved human collaboration. Not human-led research, but partnerships where human scientists had contributed critical insights that had made breakthroughs possible. Human scientists had a peculiar approach to research that other species found alternately fascinating and frustrating. Where most species specialized deeply in narrow fields, humans tended to be generalists who could see connections across disciplines. This trait had made them valuable partners in collaborative research, even when they weren't the primary investigators. Display current active research projects and their progress rates since day 0, Dr. Kethvox ordered, using the date of humanity's withdrawal as a reference point. The results were devastating. Research progress rates had declined by an average of 62% across all major projects. Worse yet, 17 critical research initiatives had been completely abandoned because they had relied on human contributions that were no longer available. Dr. Kethfox focused on one project in particular, the Quantum Communication Enhancement Initiative, a joint effort between the Etherian Collective and human researchers to develop faster-than-light communication technology. The project had been 93% complete when humanity withdrew from the Council. Now it was dead in the water. The human researchers had been responsible for the mathematical modeling that made the quantum field manipulations possible. Without their contributions, the remaining team had been unable to progress beyond basic theoretical frameworks. Computer, estimate the time required to complete current research projects without human collaboration. The answer made Dr. Kethfox's crystalline form dim with dismay. Conservative estimates suggested that projects which would have been completed within months might now take years or even decades. Some might never be completed at all. But the most troubling discovery came when Dr. Kethfox began analyzing human research patterns. Unlike other species, which focused their research efforts on problems relevant to their own civilizations, humans had consistently invested significant resources in research that benefited other species. Medical research into diseases that only affected Aquatic Federation members. Agricultural techniques specifically designed for crystalline coalition mineral requirements. Technological improvements for problems that humans themselves had never encountered. Computer, calculate the percentage of human research that directly benefited other council member species. The answer shocked even Dr. Kethfox's analytical mind. 78% of human research over the past decade had been directed towards solving problems faced by other species, often with no direct benefit to humanity itself. This revelation forced Dr. Kethfox to confront an uncomfortable truth. The Galactic Council had spent years characterizing human scientific progress as aggressive and destabilizing. In reality, humans had been using their rapid development capabilities primarily to help other species advance their own civilizations. And now that help was gone, Dr. Kethfox began composing an urgent report to the scientific collective's representatives on the Galactic Council. The galaxy was facing a research crisis that went far beyond simple economic disruption. The loss of human scientific collaboration threatened to set back galactic technological development by decades. As she worked on her report, Dr. Kethfox couldn't help but wonder what other discoveries would emerge as the full consequences of humanity's silence became clear. She wouldn't have to wait long to find out. 63 days after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, the first major crisis struck the Outer Rim territories. The emergency beacon from colony designation XK 7739 reached the nearest Council monitoring station with a Priority 1 distress classification. The automated message was brief but terrifying. Critical infrastructure failure, life support systems failing, immediate evacuation required for 847,000 colonists. Commander Zalathor of the Galactic Emergency Response Fleet received the distress call while orbiting the administrative capital of Proxima Centauri. Her four-armed frame tensed as she read the details of the crisis unfolding 3 systems away. Navigation, plot a rescue course for XK 7739, she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had coordinated hundreds of emergency operations across her 20-year career. Course plotted, Commander, replied her navigation officer, a Hive Collective drone whose compound eyes process stellar charts faster than most computers. Estimated arrival time, 6.7 standard hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. Life support analysis? The medical officer, a tall, pale Etherian whose crystalline body pulsed with diagnostic light, consulted his instruments. Based on the colony's last infrastructure report, they have approximately 14 hours of backup life support remaining. Our arrival time should provide adequate safety margin. Commander Zalathor nodded grimly. Emergency operations were always tight on timing, but this seemed manageable. What worried her was the nature of the infrastructure failure itself. Communications, give me a detailed breakdown of what happened on XK 7739. The communications officer worked frantically, sending queries to the colony's automated systems and analyzing the available data. When the report came back 20 minutes later, Zalathor felt a cold certainty settling in her stomachs. Commander, the failure appears to be in their atmospheric recycling system. Specifically, the quantum filtration array that processes industrial waste and converts it back to breathable atmosphere. What caused the failure? The maintenance schedule calls for replacement of key components every 60 standard days. The last replacement was performed 64 days ago. Zalathor's worst suspicions were confirmed. Who manufactured those components? Quantum Dynamics, Incorporated. Human corporation based on Earth's industrial moon of Luna. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. XK 7739, like most outer rim colonies, had been dependent on human-manufactured technology for its most critical systems. The colony's atmospheric recycling system used quantum filtration arrays that only human scientists had figured out how to produce efficiently. Communications, contact Quantum Dynamics immediately. We need emergency replacement components. I already tried, Commander. There's no response to any attempts at communication with human corporations or government entities. Of course there wasn't. Humanity had withdrawn completely from galactic society. They weren't answering calls from alien governments or responding to emergency requests. From their perspective, the galaxy had made it clear that human participation wasn't welcome. What about alternative manufacturers? Zalathor asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The only other species capable of manufacturing quantum filtration arrays is the Etherian Collective, but their production methods require 17 months to complete a single unit. 17 months. The colonists on XK 7739 had 14 hours. Emergency options? The medical officer's crystalline form dimmed as he considered the possibilities. We could evacuate the colonists, but our fleet capacity is insufficient for 847,000 individuals. We could handle perhaps 50,000 in the available ships. What about other colonies? Can they absorb evacuees? The nearest colonies are also experiencing infrastructure strain. Most are operating at maximum population capacity already. Zalathor felt the weight of command pressing down on her. She was facing an impossible choice. Watch nearly 1 million sentient beings die, or somehow find a solution that didn't exist within the framework of current galactic capabilities. Sir, the navigation officer spoke hesitantly. There might be another option. Go on. Long-range sensors detect a small fleet of vessels approximately 4 hours away from XK 7739. Configuration suggests human merchant ships. The bridge fell silent. Human vessels had been detected within range of a galactic emergency, but humanity was no longer part of the Council. They had no obligation to respond, and recent events suggested they had no interest in helping. Can we contact them directly? Zalathor asked. I can try, but human ships have been ignoring all attempts at communication from Council vessels for the past 2 months. Try anyway. Send them the emergency data from XK 7739. If there's any chance they'll help. The communications officer worked for several minutes, broadcasting on every frequency humans had previously used for galactic communication. The response, when it finally came, was not what anyone expected. Council vessel, this is Captain Maria Santos of the merchant ship Determination. We've received your distress data regarding Colony XK 7739. Zalathor felt a surge of hope. Captain Santos, this is Commander Zalathor of the Galactic Emergency Response Fleet. We have 847,000 colonists facing imminent death due to atmospheric system failure. Can you assist? There was a long pause before the human captain responded. When she did, her voice was carefully neutral. Commander, we are carrying replacement quantum filtration arrays in our cargo hold. These were manufactured for delivery to human colonies in this sector. Would you be willing to divert those components to XK 7739? Another pause, longer this time. Commander, I need to be clear about our situation. As you're aware, humanity is no longer part of the Galactic Council. We have no official obligation to assist in this emergency. Zalathor felt her heart sink. The humans were going to refuse, and she couldn't blame them. However, Captain Santos continued, my crew and I are not willing to watch innocent people die when we have the means to help. We will divert to XK 7739 and provide the necessary components. The relief that flooded through Zalathor was so intense that her legs nearly gave out. Captain Santos, I thank you. This is an enormous act of compassion. Don't thank me yet, Commander. There are conditions. Zalathor tensed again. What conditions? First, this assistance is being provided by my crew personally, not by humanity as a species or any human government. Second, we expect no recognition or publicity for this action. Third, this does not represent any change in humanity's position regarding the Galactic Council. Understood. Anything else? Yes. When this crisis is over, I want you to think very carefully about how many other colonies in the galaxy are dependent on human technology and human expertise. Then, ask yourself what happens when the next crisis comes. And we're not here to help. The transmission ended, leaving Zalathor staring at the communications console. Captain Santos had just delivered both salvation and a warning, wrapped together in a package that made the implications of humanity's withdrawal crystal clear. 4 hours later, the human merchant vessel Determination docked with Colony XK 7739's orbital platform. Captain Santos and her crew worked alongside the colony's technicians to replace the failed quantum filtration arrays, restoring atmospheric recycling with just hours to spare before total system collapse. Throughout the operation, Zalathor watched the humans work and was struck by their efficiency and competence. They knew the technology intimately, could troubleshoot problems faster than the automated diagnostic systems, and worked with a calm professionalism that spoke of extensive experience. When the repairs were complete and the colony's atmosphere was stabilizing, Captain Santos prepared to depart without ceremony. As her ship undocked, she sent one final message to Zalathor. Commander, you saved a lot of lives today by being willing to ask for help. Remember that feeling. You're going to need it again soon. The Determination disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a colony full of grateful survivors and a Council emergency commander who was beginning to understand the true scope of the crisis facing galactic civilization. That night, in her quarters aboard her flagship, Zalathor composed a detailed report for the Galactic Council Emergency Management Committee. Her report outlined the critical dependency that many Outer Rim colonies had developed on human technology, the impossibility of replacing human expertise in emergency timeframes, and the growing risk of catastrophic infrastructure failures across dozens of worlds. Her final recommendation was stark in its simplicity. The Galactic Council needed to find a way to restore relations with humanity or face the prospect of watching entire colonies die from preventable crises. The report was filed, reviewed, and forwarded to the appropriate committees. It would take another 17 catastrophes before the Council would take it seriously. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the human merchant fleet continued its operations along routes that no Council navigator had ever mapped. They carried cargo to destinations that didn't appear on any official star charts, served colonies that had never been registered with galactic authorities, and maintained trade networks that existed entirely outside the framework of galactic civilization. The humans weren't just surviving their exile from galactic society. They were thriving. Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Determination, looking out at the star field through the viewport that dominated the forward wall. Her navigator, Lieutenant Chun, approached with a data tablet containing their next assignment. Captain, we've received requests from 14 more colonies in this sector. They're all experiencing supply shortages now that the official trade routes have been disrupted. Santos reviewed the requests. Medical supplies, technological components, agricultural equipment, all things that had previously been delivered by integrated galactic supply chains that were now breaking down without human participation. How many ships do we have available for these runs? Santos asked. Our fleet, 12 vessels. But, Captain, Lieutenant Chen hesitated. Go on. I've been monitoring emergency frequencies. There are similar supply crises developing in 17 other sectors. The scale of need is beyond what any single merchant fleet can address. Santos nodded grimly. She had expected this. When humanity had withdrawn from galactic society, they hadn't just taken their ships and their people. They had taken their infrastructure, their expertise, and their industrial capacity. The gaps they left behind were bigger than anyone had anticipated. Contact Fleet Command, she ordered. Request priority consultation with Strategic Planning Division. Are we expanding operations, Captain? Santos looked out at the stars again, thinking about the colonists on XK 7739 who would be alive because her crew had chosen to help, despite having no obligation to do so. No, she said finally. We're going to do something much more important than that. 3 days later, Santos found herself in a secure communication room aboard the human orbital station designated Aurora Base, speaking directly with Admiral Chin Rodriguez, commander of the human independent fleet. Captain Santos. The Admiral's voice was gravelly with decades of command experience. I've read your report on the XK 7739 incident. You realize that helping them contradicted our non-interference directive. Yes, sir. But we couldn't watch nearly 1 million people die when we had the means to save them. Admiral Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. I'm not criticizing your decision, Captain. I'm proud of it. But it illustrates the problem we're facing. Santos waited for him to continue. We've detected 47 separate emergency situations across the galaxy in the past week alone. Infrastructure failures, supply shortages, medical crises. All problems that would have been easily resolved when we were part of the galactic community. And now they're not our responsibility, Santos said, though her tone suggested she was testing the statement rather than endorsing it. That's the official position, yes. But you and I both know that's not how humans actually work. We don't abandon people in need, even when those people have treated us poorly. Santos nodded. It was true. Despite everything the Galactic Council had done to marginalize and restrict humanity, most humans still felt an instinctive desire to help when they saw suffering they could prevent. So what's the plan, sir? Admiral Rodriguez smiled, and Santos could hear it in his voice. We're going to do what humans do best, Captain. We're going to solve problems. Sir, the Galactic Council wanted us out of their society because they saw us as disruptive and competitive. They wanted to handle galactic affairs without human interference. We're going to give them exactly what they asked for. Santos felt confused. I don't understand. We're not going back to the Council, Captain. We're going to build something better. Over the next hour, Admiral Rodriguez outlined a plan that was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Humanity would establish an independent network of support services that operated entirely outside the Galactic Council's authority. They would provide emergency response, technological support, and trade services to any species or colony that wanted them, regardless of Council approval. It's not revenge, the Admiral explained. It's demonstration. We're going to show the galaxy what human cooperation looks like when we're not constrained by bureaucratic restrictions and species-based prejudices. And if the Council objects, they can object all they want. We'll be operating in human space, using human resources, helping people who request our assistance. They have no authority to stop us. Santos began to see the brilliance of the plan. Humanity wouldn't be competing with the Galactic Council or trying to undermine their authority. They would simply be providing an alternative that worked better. What do you need from me, Admiral? I need you to start building relationships with the colonies and independent worlds in your sector. Find out what they need, what problems they're facing, and how we can help. But do it quietly. We don't want the Council to understand what we're doing until it's too late to stop us. As Santos ended the communication and prepared to return to her ship, she felt a sense of excitement that she hadn't experienced since the early days of human space exploration. Humanity was about to embark on something unprecedented in galactic history, the creation of a civilization that measured success not by power or territory, but by the number of lives improved and problems solved. The Galactic Council had wanted humans to be silent. They were about to discover that human silence wasn't the absence of noise. It was the sound of people working. And, across the galaxy, that work was just beginning. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the first clear signs of systematic collapse began to emerge from the galaxy's most unexpected quarter, the ancient and supposedly stable core worlds. Councillor Mektar of the Hive Collective had ruled the industrial world of Kepler 442b for over 3 centuries. Her underground cities housed billions of worker drones who had maintained the same efficient production schedules for millennia. The Hive's manufacturing complexes were legendary for their reliability and had supplied critical components to Council member species across half the galaxy. That reputation was now crumbling along with the production statistics on Mektar's data screens. Explain to me again how this happened, she said to her chief production coordinator, her chitinous mandibles clicking with barely controlled frustration. Coordinator Vex, 12, shuffled nervously on his 6 legs, his compound eyes reflecting the dim light of the underground command center. Counselor, the cascade failure began in production Complex 7. The quantum assembly matrices started producing defective components 3 weeks ago. And why wasn't this problem corrected immediately? We attempted standard troubleshooting procedures. When those failed, we consulted the technical manuals. When the manuals proved insufficient, we discovered that the original design specifications were created in collaboration with human engineers. Mektar felt her exoskeleton chill. How extensive was this human collaboration? Vex 12's nervous shuffling intensified. Counselor, our analysis indicates that humans contributed to the design or optimization of approximately 73% of our current production infrastructure. The magnitude of the revelation hit Mektar like a physical blow. The Hive Collective prided itself on independent technological development. The idea that their most critical systems relied heavily on human expertise was not just embarrassing. It was potentially catastrophic. Show me the production efficiency graphs for the past 6 months, she ordered. The holographic display materialized before them, and Mektar had to grip her command throne to steady herself. Production efficiency had been declining steadily since humanity's withdrawal, but the decline was accelerating. Components that should have taken hours to manufacture were now taking days. Quality control failures were increasing exponentially. What about our technical consultation contracts? Mektar asked desperately. Surely we maintain some connections to human expertise? All such contracts were terminated as per Council Directive 7749B, which required the cessation of all formal relationships with human entities following their withdrawal. Mektar remembered that directive. She had voted for it herself, viewing it as a necessary step to maintain the dignity of the Council in the face of human defiance. At the time, it had seemed like a reasonable way to prevent humans from leveraging their expertise for political advantage. Now it looked like the greatest strategic error in Hive Collective history. Counselor, Vex, 12 continued hesitantly. There's more. More. We've been monitoring communications from other Hive worlds. Similar production problems are being reported across 17 core worlds. The pattern suggests that human technical knowledge was more deeply integrated into our infrastructure than any of us realized. Mektar's mind raced as she considered the implications. If the Hive Collective, one of the galaxy's most technologically advanced species, was facing infrastructure collapse due to the loss of human expertise, what was happening to less advanced civilizations? Get me a priority communication link to the Galactic Council, she ordered. Immediately, Counselor. 20 minutes later, Mektar was addressing an emergency session of the Council's Industrial Oversight Committee. The familiar faces of her fellow counselors appeared in holographic projection around her, their expressions ranging from skepticism to barely concealed panic. Honored colleagues, Mektar began. The Hive Collective is experiencing what can only be described as systematic industrial failure due to the absence of human technical expertise. Counselor Zix9 of the Crystalline Coalition leaned forward in their projection. That seems like an internal management problem, Counselor Mektar. Surely the Hive's legendary efficiency can overcome temporary setbacks. This is not a temporary setback, Mektar replied sharply. Our analysis indicates that human knowledge was integrated into our core industrial processes to a degree that none of us had fully understood. Without access to that knowledge, we are facing potential production collapse within months. Even if that were true, interrupted Counselor Yithmel of the Aquatic Federation, it would only affect the Hive Collective. Other species maintained more independent development programs. Mektar had anticipated this response. I have been in communication with production coordinators across 17 different species territories. Similar problems are emerging everywhere. She activated a data transmission that flooded the committee members' screens with reports from across the galaxy. Production failures, technological breakdowns, and infrastructure collapses were being reported by nearly every major council member species. The committee fell into stunned silence as they absorbed the scope of the crisis. How is this possible? Demanded Counselor Vorthka, his tree-like form swaying with agitation. Human technological development, is barely 2 centuries old. Our civilizations have existed for millennia. Mektar had been asking herself the same question. Our analysis suggests that humans approach technological development differently than other species. While we focused on perfecting existing systems, humans consistently sought improvements and optimizations. Over time, their innovations became integrated into our infrastructure without us fully recognizing the dependency. Are you suggesting that humanity deliberately created this dependency? Asked 6-9. No, Mektar replied. The evidence suggests they genuinely believed they were helping. Most of the problematic systems were originally designed for collaborative projects where humans offered their expertise freely to benefit other species. The irony was bitter. Humanity's willingness to share their knowledge and help other species had created exactly the kind of dependency relationships that the Council had accused them of pursuing through economic aggression. What are our options for resolving this crisis? Asked Yithmel. Mektar had been dreading this question because she knew the answer would be unpalatable to the Council. In the short term, we need to re-establish contact with human technical experts and request assistance in maintaining our critical systems. Absolutely not, Vorthka declared immediately. The Council cannot be seen as crawling back to humanity after declaring them unwelcome in galactic society. Then, what do you propose? Mektar asked. Allow our civilizations to collapse rather than admit we made an error in judgment. We have technical experts of our own, 6-9 insisted. Surely we can reverse engineer the human innovations and develop independent solutions. Mektar had hoped to avoid revealing the full extent of the problem, but the Council's denial forced her hand. We have attempted reverse engineering. The time frame for developing independent solutions ranges from decades to centuries, depending on the complexity of the systems involved. Centuries? Yithmel's gills fluttered with shock. Human innovations were not simply improvements to existing technology. In many cases, they represented entirely new approaches to fundamental problems. Understanding those approaches well enough to recreate them independently requires comprehensive research programs that we do not currently have in place. The committee lapsed into another long silence as the implications sank in. They were facing a choice between swallowing their pride and asking humanity for help or watching their civilizations gradually collapse over the coming decades. There must be another option, Vorthka said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. Mektar was about to respond when her chief coordinator appeared in her peripheral vision, signaling an urgent message. She authorized the interruption with a gesture. Counselor, Vex, 12 whispered. We're receiving a communication from an unregistered vessel requesting permission to dock with our orbital platform. Who is it? The vessel identifies itself as the human ship Technical Assistance, Captain Jennifer Walsh commanding. They're offering emergency engineering support. Mektar felt her breathing passages constrict. How did they know about our problems? Unknown, Counselor. But they're transmitting technical specifications for repairs to 3 of our most critical production failures. Mektar looked at the specifications on her personal display and felt a mixture of relief and humiliation. The human solutions were elegant, practical, and could be implemented within days rather than months. Counselor, Vex, 12 prompted. What are your orders? Mektar looked back at the Council Committee, where her fellow counselors continued debating options that didn't exist. She had a choice to make that would determine whether billions of her people continued to live in productive prosperity or slowly declined into technological poverty. Grant them docking permission, she said quietly. Counselor Mektar? 6-9's voice cut through her thoughts. You seem distracted. I apologize, colleagues. I've just received an urgent communication regarding our industrial crisis. What kind of communication? Vorthka asked suspiciously. Mektar realized that this moment would define not just her own future, but potentially the future of the entire Galactic Council. She could lie, maintain the pretense that solutions existed within the Council framework, and watch her civilization slowly crumble. Or she could tell the truth and face the consequences of admitting that they needed human help. The communication is from a human vessel offering technical assistance, she said clearly. The committee erupted in protests and denials, but Mektar continued speaking over the noise. I am accepting their offer. My responsibility is to the welfare of my people, not to the political pride of this council. If you accept human assistance, you will be acting in violation of Council Directive 7749B, Vorthka warned. Then, I suggest the Council reconsider that directive, Mektar replied. Because I will not be the last Council member forced to choose between political posturing and the survival of their civilization. She terminated the communication link and turned to Vex, 12. Prepare a full briefing on our technical problems. I want the human engineers to have complete access to whatever information they need. Yes, Counselor. And the Council's reaction? Mektar considered the question. The Council will eventually face the same choice I'm facing today. The only question is how many of their people they're willing to sacrifice before they admit the truth. As the human ship technical assistants docked with the Hive Collective's orbital platform, Mektar prepared to meet with Captain Walsh and her engineering team. She was about to become the first Council member to publicly acknowledge humanity's indispensable value to galactic civilization. She would not be the last. Across the galaxy, similar scenarios were beginning to play out on dozens of worlds. Human ships appeared wherever technical crises emerged, offering assistance without fanfare or political demands. Their crews worked efficiently and professionally, solved problems that had stymied local experts for months, and departed without seeking recognition or reward. But they left behind something more valuable than any payment. Proof that humanity's silence wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The humans were building something new in the spaces between the stars, something that would fundamentally change how galactic civilization understood cooperation, assistance, and community. The Council members who were wise enough to recognize this would find themselves partners in humanity's new vision. Those who weren't would discover that pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Captain Jennifer Walsh stood in the engineering bay of the Hive Collective's main production facility, surrounded by alien technology that buzzed and hummed with barely contained energy. Her team of human engineers worked alongside Hive technicians, their voices mixing in a harmony of technical discussion that transcended species barriers. The quantum matrix alignment is off by 0.03 degrees. Called out Lieutenant Martinez from beneath a massive assembly mechanism. That's within standard tolerance for most applications, but it's causing cumulative errors in your precision manufacturing. Vex, 12 clicked excitedly as he absorbed the information. We never considered such small variations could create systematic problems. It's a human thing, Martinez replied, sliding out from under the machinery. We tend to obsess over tiny details that seem unimportant until they add up to big problems. Walsh watched the interaction with satisfaction. This was how cooperation was supposed to work, species sharing knowledge and perspectives to solve problems together. Not the rigid bureaucracy and political posturing that had characterized the Galactic Council. Captain Walsh, Counselor Mektar approached, her insectoid features displaying what Walsh had learned to recognize as curiosity. May I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping us? Your species has no obligation to the Hive Collective, and we have not treated humanity well in recent years. Walsh considered the question carefully. Counselor, can I ask you something in return? Certainly. When your production systems started failing, did you think about the billions of people whose lives would be affected if those systems collapsed completely? Of course. It was my primary concern. That's why we're here, Walsh said simply. We thought about them too. Mektar's compound eyes reflected the facility's lighting as she processed this response. It's that simple. It's that simple. Humans have a hard time watching preventable suffering, even when the people suffering have been unkind to us. But surely there are political considerations, strategic advantages to be gained. Walsh shook her head. Counselor, let me tell you something about human politics. Our leaders didn't send us here. Our government doesn't even know we're here. My crew and I are here because we heard about your problems and decided to help. I don't understand. Who authorized this mission? We did. Human ship captains have broad autonomy to respond to emergency situations. When we received word about infrastructure failures across multiple worlds, we organized ourselves and came to help. Mektar was quiet for a long moment. Without official authorization, without political oversight, without expectation of reward. Right. This is how humans operate. Walsh smiled. This is how humans operate when we're not constrained by bureaucratic committees that spend months debating whether helping people is politically advantageous. The implications of that statement settled over Mektar like a revelation. She was beginning to understand that humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council hadn't been a retreat, it had been a liberation. "Captain Walsh," she said slowly, "I think I need to have some very serious conversations with my fellow council members." "That's your decision, counselor. But if I can offer one piece of advice, please, don't wait too long. The problems you're facing here are happening everywhere, and they're going to get worse before they get better. The galaxy needs solutions, not political speeches." As Walsh returned to supervising the repairs, Mektar retreated to a private communications chamber to compose the most important message of her political career. She was going to tell the Galactic Council exactly what she had learned about humanity's new approach to galactic citizenship. And she was going to recommend that they pay very close attention to what humans were building in the silence they had imposed. Because that silence was about to become the foundation for something that would reshape the galaxy forever. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, the invitation arrived on Earth through channels that shouldn't have existed. President Elena Vasquez sat in her office in the Global Council headquarters, staring at the quantum encrypted message that had somehow bypassed every security system protecting Earth's communications network. The fact that it had been delivered at all was impressive. The fact that it was signed by representatives from 12 different Galactic Council member species was unprecedented. "Madam President," her chief of staff entered the office with barely concealed excitement. "The diplomatic corps has confirmed the authenticity of the signatures. This is a legitimate communication from faction of council members." Vasquez read the message again, analyzing every word for hidden meanings or political traps. The content was straightforward enough. A formal request for humanity to participate in an emergency consultation regarding matters of mutual galactic interest. "What's your assessment, David?" she asked her chief of staff. David Chun had been managing diplomatic crises for 15 years, but he'd never seen anything quite like this. "Madam President, this isn't coming through official council channels. These 12 species are reaching out to us independently, which suggests they're acting against the wishes of the council majority. Or it's a trap designed to lure us back into a position where they can impose new restrictions on human activities. Possible, but unlikely. Our intelligence sources suggest that the Council is facing internal fractures over how to handle the ongoing infrastructure crises. Several member species have been accepting unofficial human assistance despite Council prohibitions." Vasquez stood and walked to her office's viewport, looking out at the busy traffic patterns around Earth's orbital platforms. In the past year, humanity had built an impressive network of independent installations throughout human space. They were no longer dependent on galactic infrastructure for any of their essential needs. "What's our current relationship status with these 12 species?" she asked. "Mixed. The Hive Collective and Aquatic Federation have been the most cooperative with our unofficial assistance programs. The Etherian Collective and Mineral Coalition have had limited contact. The others fall somewhere in between. And the species that aren't on this list? The Crystalline Coalition, the Vegan Empire, and the Ancient Core species remain firmly aligned with Speaker Vorthka's hardline position. No contact, no cooperation, no compromise." Vasquez nodded. The galaxy was splitting into factions, and humanity found itself in the unexpected position of being courted by the pragmatists while remaining opposed by the traditionalists. "Madam President," David continued, "there's something else you should know. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual activity in the galactic core regions." "What kind of activity?" "Massive infrastructure failures. Not the gradual decline we've been observing on the rim worlds, but sudden, catastrophic collapses. 3 core worlds have gone completely dark in the past month." Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. "Casualties? Unknown. The affected worlds aren't responding to any communications, and no council vessels have been dispatched to investigate." "Why not?" "Because the council is pretending the failures aren't happening. Official reports classify the communication blackouts as temporary technical difficulties." Vasquez returned to her desk and activated her secure communications console. "Give me Admiral Rodriguez." The Admiral appeared on screen within minutes. his weathered face grave with concern. "Madam President, I assume you've seen the invitation." "I have. What's your assessment of the military situation?" "Honestly, the galaxy is falling apart faster than we anticipated. Our intelligence network reports infrastructure failures across 47 systems, supply chain collapses affecting hundreds of colonies, and political instability on 17 council-member worlds." "Political instability?" "Yes, ma'am. It appears that some populations are beginning to question why their governments refuse to accept human assistance while their living standards decline." Vasquez considered the implications. "Are we looking at potential civil conflicts?" "It's possible. The Mineral Coalition has already experienced 3 separate worker uprisings demanding that their government request human technical support. The Etherian Collective is facing similar pressures." "And the invitation?" Admiral Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Madam President, I believe this is their attempt to find a face-saving solution. They need our help, but they can't admit it publicly without undermining the entire council power structure. So they want a secret meeting where they can negotiate for assistance without appearing to capitulate to humanity." "That's my reading." Vasquez spent several minutes reviewing the strategic assessments on her screen. Humanity was in a strong position, stronger than they had ever been as council members. Their independent infrastructure was thriving, their technology was advancing rapidly without bureaucratic constraints, and their reputation for competence was spreading throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, what's your recommendation?" "I recommend we accept the invitation, but on our terms. Make it clear that we're not coming as supplicants seeking readmission to the Council. We're coming as an independent civilization willing to discuss mutually beneficial cooperation. And if they try to impose conditions on our assistance..." Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Then, we walk away and let them figure out how to solve their problems without us." 2 weeks later, the meeting took place in neutral space aboard a massive commercial platform operated by the Independent Traders Consortium. The platform, known as Commerce Station Nexus, was one of the few places in the galaxy where representatives from any species could meet without political complications. President Vasquez arrived aboard the heavy cruiser Washington, accompanied by a small diplomatic team and Admiral Rodriguez. As their shuttle approached the docking bay, she could see vessels from 12 different species already berthed at the station. "Impressive turnout," commented Ambassador Sarah Chan, who had volunteered to return to diplomatic service for this crucial meeting. "They wouldn't be here if they weren't desperate," Admiral Rodriguez observed. The meeting itself took place in one of the station's larger conference facilities, a circular chamber designed to accommodate the various environmental needs of different species. As Vasquez entered, she was struck by the nervous energy in the room. These were powerful representatives from ancient civilizations, but they carried themselves like people who knew they were in trouble. Councillor Mektar of the Hive Collective served as the unofficial spokesperson for the group. Her insectoid features were carefully controlled, but Vasquez could sense the tension beneath her diplomatic composure. "President Vasquez," Mektar began, "we appreciate your willingness to meet with us despite the difficult circumstances of our previous interactions. Councillor Mektar, I appreciate the courage it took for you and your colleagues to arrange this meeting. I know it carries political risks for all of you. Indeed, which is why we must be direct in our discussions." Vasquez nodded. "Please, speak freely. The galactic infrastructure upon which our civilizations depend is experiencing systematic failure. Our analysis indicates that the primary cause is the absence of human technical expertise and innovation. We need your assistance." The words hung in the air like a confession. Vasquez looked around the table at representatives who had spent decades dismissing human capabilities and now found themselves forced to acknowledge their dependency on those same capabilities. "What kind of assistance are you looking for?" Vasquez asked. Councillor Yithmel of the Aquatic Federation leaned forward in her environmental suit. "Technical support for critical infrastructure, emergency response coordination for failing colonies, and access to human innovations that we no longer have access to." And in return, the representatives exchanged glances. This was clearly the part of the discussion they had been dreading. "What would humanity require in return for such assistance?" asked Councillor Kethrau of the Mineral Coalition. Vasquez had anticipated this question and had spent weeks discussing possible answers with her advisors. The response she gave would shape the future of human-galactic relations for generations. First, she said carefully, humanity requires recognition as an equal partner in any cooperative arrangement. Not junior members seeking approval, but independent equals contributing to mutual benefit. Several representatives nodded. This was reasonable and expected. Second, we require the freedom to operate without bureaucratic oversight. Human assistance will be provided according to human judgment about what help is needed and when. This caused more discomfort around the table, but no one objected. Third, we require access to galactic markets and trade routes without discriminatory restrictions. That seems fair, said Councillor Vorthiak of the Etherian Collective. And fourth, Vasquez continued, we require the establishment of formal diplomatic relations between humanity and each of your governments, independent of the Galactic Council structure. This caused an immediate stir around the table. They were asking humanity to help them while still maintaining loyalty to the Council that had expelled humanity from galactic society. You're asking us to break with the Council, said Councillor Zalanine of the Crystalline Collective. I'm asking you to acknowledge that the Council's current structure isn't working for anyone, Vasquez replied, including your own people. Councillor Mektar spoke slowly. President Vasquez, what you're proposing amounts to the creation of an alternative to the Galactic Council. No, Vasquez corrected. What I'm proposing is the creation of something better than the Galactic Council. An organization based on mutual cooperation rather than bureaucratic control. A community where species contribute according to their strengths and receive help according to their needs. And humanity would lead this organization. Humanity would participate in this organization as an equal member. Leadership would be based on competence and contribution, not on political seniority or species age. The room fell silent as the representatives absorbed the magnitude of what Vasquez was proposing. She wasn't just offering assistance. She was offering them a way to escape from a political system that was failing them all. Councillor Yithmel spoke first. President Vasquez, if we were to accept your proposal, what would be the timeline for implementation? That depends on how quickly you can convince your governments to act. Humanity is prepared to begin providing assistance immediately upon the establishment of formal diplomatic relations. And if some of our colleagues choose to remain with the traditional council structure, then they're welcome to solve their problems using traditional council methods, Admiral Rodriguez interjected. We're offering an alternative, not demanding universal participation. Councillor Mektar looked around the table at her fellow representatives. My colleagues, we need to make a decision. We can continue trying to preserve a system that is failing our people, or we can help build something that might actually work. The political risks are enormous, warned Councillor Kethrau. If we break with the council, and this new arrangement fails, we could find ourselves isolated from both systems. And if we don't break with the council, Mektar replied, we'll find ourselves isolated from solutions. The debate that followed lasted 4 hours. Vasquez and her team waited patiently as the alien representatives argued among themselves, weighing political survival against the welfare of their civilizations. When they finally reached a decision, it was Councillor Mektar who delivered it. President Vasquez, we are prepared to accept your proposal, not as individuals, but as representatives empowered by our governments to negotiate new diplomatic arrangements. Vasquez felt a surge of satisfaction, but kept her expression neutral. Excellent. When can we begin formal negotiations? Immediately. But I must warn you, the Council will not accept this development quietly. Speaker Vorthka and the core world representatives will view our actions as treachery. Let them, Admiral Rodriguez said firmly. They had their chance to solve these problems through the existing system. They chose political posturing over practical solutions. As the meeting concluded and the representatives prepared to depart, Vasquez realized that humanity had just taken the first step toward fundamentally reshaping galactic civilization. They weren't returning to the old system that had marginalized them. They were building a new one based on human values of cooperation, efficiency, and practical problem-solving. The Galactic Council could keep its silence. Humanity was about to give the galaxy something much more valuable, a voice that actually listened and a system that actually worked. But First, they would have to survive the Council's response to this challenge to their ancient authority. And that response was already being planned in the deepest chambers of the galactic core, where Speaker Vorthka was discovering that political power meant nothing when the civilization you ruled was collapsing around you. 18 months after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, Speaker Vorthka stood alone in the vast council chamber that had once housed representatives from 47 species. Now, only 23 species maintained active membership, and even those showed little enthusiasm for the proceedings. The ancient tree-like being's bark had darkened with stress over the past months as he watched his carefully maintained galactic order crumble. His 6 eyes surveyed the half-empty chamber where heated debates had once raged over trade policies and territorial disputes. Those debates seemed trivial now, compared to the existential crisis facing what remained of the Galactic Council. Council Session 7391 is now in session, he announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Today's primary agenda item is the unauthorized formation of alternative political structures by former council members. The phrase former council members tasted bitter in his mouth. 12 species had officially withdrawn from the council over the past 6 months, all of them citing the same reason: the council's inability to address the infrastructure crisis that was spreading across the galaxy. Councilor Zix9 of the Crystalline Coalition activated their translation matrix. Speaker Vorthka, perhaps it is time to acknowledge that our traditional approaches have proven insufficient for current challenges. Insufficient. Vorthka's bark rustled with indignation. The Council has maintained galactic stability for over 50,000 years. A temporary crisis does not invalidate millennia of successful governance. Temporary. The voice belonged to Councilor Felmore of the Gaseous Collective, their form shimmering with agitation inside their containment suit. Speaker, we have lost contact with 17 core worlds. Industrial production has collapsed across 43 systems. This is not temporary. This is systemic failure. Vorthka refused to acknowledge the scope of the crisis. These challenges can be addressed through existing council mechanisms. We do not need to abandon our principles to accommodate the demands of a species that refused to accept proper governance. The humans didn't make demands, corrected Councilor Yithmel, attending the session via remote communication from her new position as the Aquatic Federation's ambassador to the Cooperative Alliance, the new organization that humanity had established with the 12 breakaway species. They offered assistance. There's a significant difference. The reminder of Yithmel's new role stung Vorthka deeply. She had been one of his most trusted allies for centuries, but even she had eventually chosen to abandon the council when her people faced starvation due to collapsed supply chains. Ambassador Yithmel, he said with forced formality, you are no longer a member of this council. Your comments are not welcome in our proceedings. I'm attending as an observer, which is my right under Council Charter Section 12 Alpha. And I'm here to make an offer. Vorthka's ancient instincts warned him to refuse whatever she was about to propose. But curiosity overcame caution. What offer? The Cooperative Alliance is prepared to provide emergency assistance to any council member species experiencing critical infrastructure failures. No political conditions, no demands for systemic change. Just practical help to save lives and maintain essential services. The chamber fell silent. It was exactly the kind of offer that the old council should have been able to make to its own members, but everyone present knew they lacked the capability to follow through on such promises. And what does the Alliance expect in return for this assistance? Asked Councilor Zix9. Nothing, Yithmel replied simply. This is humanitarian aid, not political negotiation. Vorthka felt his root tendrils tighten with frustration. The humans and their allies were once again demonstrating the kind of practical competence that made the Council's bureaucratic approaches look inadequate by comparison. The Council does not require assistance from breakaway factions, he declared. We are fully capable of addressing our members' needs through established channels. Are we? Councilor Pelkex of the Avian Confederation spoke up for the first time in the session. Speaker, my homeworld has been without reliable power generation for 3 weeks. The Council's Technical Assistance Committee has been reviewing our request for help for 2 months. Complex technical problems require thorough analysis, Vorthka replied defensively. This isn't a complex technical problem, Pelkex shot back. It's a power coupling failure that any competent engineer could repair in hours. But we don't have competent engineers anymore, because all of our best technical experts came from collaborative programs that included human participation. Then, we will develop new expertise internally. How long will that take, Speaker? My people are facing industrial collapse and medical emergencies while we develop new expertise. Vorthka was about to respond when his chief administrative aide approached his speaking platform with urgent news. The aide whispered something that made Vorthka's bark pale to a sickly gray color. "What is it?" demanded Counselor Zix9. Vorthka struggled to maintain his composure as he processed the information he'd just received. It appears that representatives from the Cooperative Alliance have arrived in this system without requesting permission to enter Council space. "How many representatives?" asked Pelkex. 17 ships, including the human flagship Enterprise carrying President Vasquez herself. The implications hit the chamber like a shock wave. The humans were coming here, to the Council's seat of power, less than 2 years after being expelled from galactic society. "Are they armed?" someone asked. The ships appear to be modified civilian vessels with minimal defensive capabilities, Vorthka's aide reported. "They're broadcasting a message requesting permission to address the Council." "Absolutely not," Vorthka declared immediately. "We will not legitimize this unauthorized political structure by allowing them to speak in our chambers." "Speaker," Yithmel's voice carried a note of warning. "I strongly advise you to reconsider that position." "And why is that, Ambassador?" "Because they're not here to ask for readmission to the Council. They're here to offer the Council membership in the Cooperative Alliance." The statement stunned the chamber into absolute silence. The idea that humanity would arrive at the seat of galactic government and offer to include the Council as a member of their new organization was so audacious that it took several minutes for anyone to process what it meant. That's impossible," stammered Counselor Zix9. "The Council is the legitimate government of galactic civilization. We don't join other organizations join us." "That was true when the Council actually governed galactic civilization," Yithmel replied gently. "But look around you. How many empty seats do you see? How many of your member species are currently facing crises that you can't resolve?" Vorthka's eyes swept across the chamber, taking in the stark reality of the Council's decline. Of the original 47 member species, 12 had joined the Cooperative Alliance, 8 had withdrawn into isolation to focus on internal problems, and 4 had simply stopped participating in Council activities without formally withdrawing. The Galactic Council that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years was dying. "Speaker Vorthka," came a new voice through the chamber's communication system. "This is President Elena Vasquez of the Human Cooperative Alliance. I'm requesting permission to address the Galactic Council on matters of urgent mutual interest." Vorthka stared at the communication console, paralyzed by the magnitude of the choice he faced. He could refuse to meet with Vasquez and maintain the illusion of Council authority while his civilization